Okay. Okay, everyone, welcome back to part 2 of Geospatial Smart Cities. We have in front of us a panel. Some of them you'll recognize these panel people. Some of them are new faces we've just magically brought in. So we recognize that this is the sort of topic we thought was worthwhile spending a bit of time having a discussion on, rather than just being kind of broadcast mode about information and technology demonstrations. And while that's cool, we wanted to really have a discussion, because the sense we get is there's a lot of excitement about these topics on digital twins and about smart cities, but perhaps where these different terms, where these different disciplines fit together, that's something that we probably need to make sure as a community we understand that, and what our role in it is. What's our role in terms of enabling these sorts of initiatives? So I'll quickly introduce the panel. I think, as I said, most of them you should know because we're presenting before. Maybe wave your hand as I call your name out. This is the plan here. Okay, so Michael Healy. You can applaud if you want. It's like last night. No, it's not last night. Okay. We've got Morris from Environment Canterbury. Hello. We've got a new face for you. You've got Sean from Wellington City Council, a late entry here. Yep. From Oricon, we've got Simon York, minus the paddleboard. From UAS, we have Bevan Lewell. Oh, actually, we don't have Bevan Lewell. We have, I'm sorry, I don't have your name.
Maxim, yeah.
Moxham.
Yeah, so I'm with Woods to make it everything even more complicated. So,
You're with Woods.
We work as a partnership on this project. So Bevan is a project partner, and I'm with Woods. Maxim, who is basically a GIS and remote sensing. So yeah,
Cool.
We'll just split it this way. Yep.
Cool. Okay. Thank you, Moxham. Max, that's going to stick. Thank you. Thanks, Max. Welcome. And last but not least, we have Esri Andreas. Cool. Okay, so we've got a couple of questions we're going to put to the panel, but then we're going to open it up for you guys to ask questions of them. So the first question I had, and I'd like maybe to get to pass this mic along and get a quick answer from each of them, is how would you define a smart city? And we'll start with Morris, because he's already forming his answer, I can see. And he's sitting at the end.
How long do you have? No, just for this question.
Oh. 2 minutes.
I guess a smart city is where the decisions are made collaboratively with the community, and the community gets to see how the city is behaving, the services, the complexity, the bottlenecks. A city's never finished, so you're always improving it. So yeah, the smart city is all that information that goes into informing the community, not just the decision makers. Yeah.
Thanks, Morris.
I suppose I'll talk about the attitude a city needs to be smart. It needs to be creative, innovative, brave, resilient. So we've talked a lot about technology, but I suppose it's attitude to a degree. Take risks, learn, be open.
So I'd say a smart city is one where everything that's sort of living and breathing as part of that entity that is the city has the information available to every stakeholder that's involved in that city. The ability to be able to reach in and actually understand how the city is living and breathing.
Thank you.
I'm thinking that it has to be any tools that get developed even by government or consultancies, they're not enforced onto public, but public actually consciously accepts those tools and works with them and contributes. So I think that's when that sort of synergy, that's when everything works, actually. That's what I'm thinking.
Thank you.
So I think in terms of smarter cities, And if you think about what a city is, it's a whole series of patterns that people make, that creatures make, that is made by the land and the dynamics. And it's about understanding those. So the answer's relative to the place you're in. The other point with the smarter city is it's enmeshed with our ideas of the future. So if you go back in time, we looked at garden cities and cities where we could escape the industrial pollution of the Victorian era, and how we could use technology to spread out in green spaces. What we've done is brought that idea forward now to say, we have this digital technology, how can we fuse it together to make that better future, that well-being for citizens?
Thanks, Sean.
Yeah, I have presented it a couple of times, but maybe to summarize it, maybe starting with the technical term, it's like a data-driven urban development, connecting people. I think it like this.
Cool. Just hold on to that just now. I'm going to come back to your next question, which is, what do we collectively think are the barriers to us having a smart, and Sean said smart air city, so maybe we've got smart already, maybe we're making them smarter, maybe that's the inference. What are the barriers to us? Why don't we have smart cities right now? What are the barriers that are impeding that?
I've been working on this particular subject for about a decade now. I've always found the biggest barrier was a lack of imagination. Too few people sit there and think about the future and figure out how to actually make the future happen. And understanding that there isn't just one future, there are multiple futures that will happen either in sequence or parallel, depending on who you are. And the challenge in that is, how do you make those decisions? How do you figure out what you're going to invest in, knowing that what you're investing in is ultimately just a step to something else? And when you start to think that way, the answers become much clearer, but also much more difficult to actually implement at the scale of a city.
Thanks, Sean. Any more comments? Max?
I'm thinking that potential barrier could be, for example, there are lots of models, for example, flood models, and if those models are working on the screen, but when the reality happens and the model doesn't work, how would smart city respond to that scenario? How would smart city start updating the data? How would smart city start to make those collaborative decisions between different agencies? So that's one of the barriers could be the actual real-time scenario when the system gets tested.
Thanks, Max.
From a local government perspective, fear of failure is a real barrier. We talked a bit like risk-taking and bravery. Traditionally, government employees haven't been applauded for taking risks. So in a world where they need to move quicker and become more creative, they need the support to manage that, and I suppose have leadership that support them to do it. And I suppose we're not the easiest people to deal with. So when people like US and Woods want to get things done quickly or bring products to market, in a short period of time, government customers don't generally move as fast. So we need to move faster.
Thanks, Michael.
I guess current state for cities are all the decisions that have built up in the past to what the current state is. So if you just have an imagination and you forward plan 30, 40, 50 years, you're providing that vision for the city to aim at, how you solve those complex problems that have built up with, I guess, I won't say ill-informed, but we don't 50 years ago, we don't have all the information that we have today, so we can make better decisions today to help maybe undo some of the wrong decisions that we've done in the past.
Thank you. I guess collaboration is a word that's come up a number of times in the presentations earlier this afternoon and in a couple of the responses here. Do we think that is lack of collaboration one of those barriers? I mean, you mentioned, Michael, about the private and public sector maybe having different speeds or cadences. Is the collaboration Is that where we need to put our effort into?
I'm holding the mic, so I'll kick it off.
Yeah.
Definitely, yes. When you think of, I don't know, climate change or greenhouse gas reductions, as a city, a council can only do so much. A group of councils can do more. A group of councils with the CDHB, industry, with council-controlled companies got a chance to make an actual difference. So if our goals are fundamentally the same, why aren't we acting, together? But it's bloody hard. So practice makes better.
I always think collaboration is a term that's slightly misunderstood. It's not something that means everybody knows what's happening in a place and is working together. What it means is people who have the abilities and interests can cooperate to get to a goal. And so when I think about meeting those challenges and scaling into things like climate change and energy shortages and things like that, there's an often unrecognised role of public servants in market building and creating the preconditions so that companies can pursue their goals, so that communities can pursue their goals, and governments can support and do the same in order to scale that societal change. But what you're not trying to do is create that single coordinated thing so that all effort is going into one big initiative that's trying to coordinate, because no organisation has the capacity to do that.
I would second to it. I mentioned it in another session. So when we talk to a city, you really need to find this one champion that is really having maybe a tiny bit of the vision or the vision at all, and then you start talking to this guy, and he is really on fire, and then he brings in more people from the city, from the municipality, and it's all different departments, and they may have interest, but I don't know, not the go from their department, or not the will, or not the, I don't know what hinders them to actually join forces to actually start something. Yeah. And then on the other hand is the data that is maybe a barrier on the other hand, but the collaboration piece is the initial thing that is not really kicking off this project. No.
The flip to that would be, are there any examples of collaboration that are awesome that you guys have seen? You've collectively got exposure to a number of initiatives across the planet. Is there one collaboration example which you would point to say that's an example we could follow? You can reference your own organisation if you want to.
I'll take a couple of examples from home in Wellington. One is the Trauma Intelligence Group. So it is a data exchange between the hospital, emergency room, the police, citizens, all focused on city safety and understanding essentially what that problem that manifests in each jurisdiction looks like from those different perspectives, and where each jurisdiction can intervene most effectively. Probably another really good example is in conservation. So there have been 9 local bird species have their extinctions reversed in Wellington. The most common places to see kaka are now the main streets of the capital city and remote bush. That's been done through massive community effort, through council investment, through DOC, through Predator Free New Zealand. It's a really good example of that goal with a degree of coordinated action, but the agency has been through individuals who might be doing things for slightly different reasons, but are going in the same direction. And the data underpins that as that collaboration medium to make sure that, we don't mow down the newly planted native trees. We don't blow up the bike track that's just been put through with all the native plantings, that kind of thing.
Thanks, Sean. Anyone else got any examples of awesomeness from around the planet or from their own postcode?
I was lucky enough to go to the World Smart Cities Expo in Korea last week, and we got to tour a couple of the different couple of different cities' control centres. And one of the impressive things were we talk about, let's say, managing our transport system, having a single pane of glass over it. But a couple of examples I saw of operations centre that had their 3 waters, their transport, their logistics, their facilities all online. So they really did have the ability to visualise and manage the city in real time. There's a couple of caveats. It was contingent on having 14,000 cameras. So pretty much there's nowhere you can hide. So that's something I suppose a question mark for us. But some of the, Incheon, I think I said, their crime rate had gone down 40%. So is that a trade-off people are willing to make? I don't know. But also they had very firm direction from government, or clear guidance in terms of what was expected of them, which gave them a clear mandate. I suppose I'm not saying we should copy them or ape them, but it does show the value of having some good direction from central government. And we're talking about digital twins and a few other kind of bigger pieces of work. Central could help us by laying the framework and give us some guidance for that.
Cool, thanks Michael. I had a question, and I'll pass it across to the audience shortly. The one last question I had, maybe again for each of you, if it's okay, would be, what's the role, we sometimes think of spatial as a secret weapon to solve all kinds of problems. And so the question might be, is spatial the secret weapon to help with the smart cities vision that we have? And if so, what's the role of the GIS community? What can people at this event or online or more widely, what should they be doing when they return to their roles if they want to be part of that vision?
I guess spatial is understanding the where, and if you don't have that understanding, you might miss the relationships between things. A city is thousands upon thousands, if not millions of people moving about, work to home, to school, and providing all those services to the people at their locations, home and at work. The spatial is crucial in understanding where.
Would you have any advice and this is, I guess, you run a team of these people, right? What's they're an expert in ArcGIS Pro, they've just learned how to do insights. What should they be, what could they be doing? Sorry, I'm hitting you with a hard question here, Morris.
Just ArcGIS itself is a constellation of applications and technology, and I don't expect them all to know everything. So I guess, where do their passions lie? What problems do they need to work on? And how do they bring the tools to solve those problems? Yeah.
Thanks, Morris.
I suppose as a non-GIS person who's been a customer, a collaborator, I suppose the call would be, think of your customers, so whether that end customer is someone in the community or whether it's a planner within your business or a traffic engineer. I suppose you've got the power to enable them to self-serve this data, the insights. So I suppose in a way, as well as being an expert in your field, you're an enabler and you can open doors of understanding and insights to your customers, whether they're internal or external. So, part of that is talking to them, building a relationship, but you guys can unlock a lot of value for organisations. So.
Thanks, Michael.
Yes, spatial is extremely important, especially at a city scale. Especially as we head towards what's coming next in this augmented layer of information that's going to be basically overlaid on the world around us. So as you walk around and being able to just, once we get to the point where it's simply a pair of glasses you wear, right? And to the point where you'll be able to walk around and see the information that you need overlaid on the city around you. So, I think it's vitally important. On the other note of what can be done, and I think what we need to do more, and I've talked to a number of people about this week, is this idea of we need to share better. We need more open data, more open information. We see too often the same things done in different companies and everyone's doing the same thing just to repeat the same information. And that's a lot of people's time being wasted repeating the same thing. So I feel like we really need to be open in what we're developing and what we're sharing.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, I completely agree. And sort of from consultancy perspective of view, it's always been a challenge of sharing inter-consultancy and consultancy to government and vice versa. Obviously, a map or geospatial is base for everything from, I don't know, ages ago. The way how we improve it, the way how we develop the foundation, and also data that comes in from different organizations is quite important as well. So standards, especially in geospatial, is also really good. It actually helps government to sort of communicate better with the data suppliers, and yeah, it makes it much easier to work with as well. So definitely.
Thanks, Max.
So, if you look at the thing that animates a smart city, it's that desire to learn and to understand and to become part of something bigger and achieve something bigger, and that's through the medium of the city. If we look at where spatial is, it's the backbone of that. It's the one medium that brings together all the different disparate technologies and professionals into the same frame of reference. The challenge for us, though, as cities is we've spent the last 100 years mapping ourselves and understanding ourselves. If we look at things like climate change and economic restructuring and social change, we're going to have to remap ourselves a lot more quickly. Those patterns, as they disrupt, ripple through the structures of our cities that support our well-being. And those ripples can lift people up, but they can just as easily knock people over. And so, for geospatial professionals, the two bits of advice I would have is, one, be yourself. Whenever I've put a geospatial professional in front of a minister to brief them, they have loved it. They've absolutely adored it. Leaders don't necessarily always understand digital, but they understand spatial and they understand how it links to the world and the people they're trying to serve. The second piece would be to get to the edge of the profession. I'm a planner. Believe me, I'm functioning at the very edge of my profession. It's in the edges of the professions that you find the purposes, and those purposes let you reach out, understand, and start to achieve things. And those paths of achievement eventually mean that you can change the world, or you can change a city. That's enough inspiration.
Thanks, Sean. I'm actually writing this down. This is.
Here's somebody better.
Yeah. I need the bigger bit of paper is the other problem, yeah.
So I really second what you just said. I mean, it's a nice metaphor, like the backbone, right? Location is everything, right? It connects, right? This is where, you can build these relationships, analyze, connect things, bits and pieces, whatever. So I'm with you on this one. What needs to be done, or what can be done, I mean, for us as a vendor, it's like, getting people to use our stuff and share it, right? And I've been in some webinars already where just small communities start communicating about even the tiniest workflow, right? And people will adapt to it, will come back and say, hey, you have done it. This is what I can relate to it, right? If a city of Shanghai or New York comes and says, hey, this is our twin, people turn around, go away and say, hey, no, New York, they have the money, they can do everything, right? So they don't even look at it. And the other thing is that GIS people, at least what I see in Germany, for example, GIS people are the people who sit in a dark room and deal with data. So, right? So they need to step up. They are these are the masters of tomorrow. They can handle this stuff. They can talk about this stuff. They can show this stuff. Yeah, those are not IoT nerds or IT nerds that sit somewhere. Right? Get this message out. A good user group is the geology guys. They are still under the surface, and they can do so much stuff with GIS. Yeah. That's it.
Thanks, Andreas. Okay, I'm going to open the questions up to the floor. We've got a microphone somewhere out there. Here we are. Thank you very much. So hands up. Oh, furthest point. This is good. Do you want to get a good exercise?
My question is just around the role of the citizen and the, I guess, citizen science applications. Has there been any kind of appetite or thought about how you actually collect data from citizens, be it, weather stations, or they might have a drone and they want to capture images in the case of like emergency management, things like that? Is there thoughts about kind of setting up a framework to work with people, even if that's just maybe setting up some kind of competitions or hackathons around some of the data that's available?
So we've run a number of hackathons.
Oh.
A number of hackathons in the past. So we're one of the organisations that brought GovHack to New Zealand. And in terms of citizen science, one of the really interesting examples at the moment is the Pōneke Promise. So what that does is it has citizens record the areas around Courtenay Place that they feel unsafe and why they feel unsafe. And that's then used to inform the city's ongoing decisions and investments in that part of the city. I also am in charge of the civil defence intelligence for Wellington. And so one of the workflows that was put in place after the last sets of earthquakes was how we use citizen-provided data for damage reports. Citizen data is not like other data sets in that you do need to authenticate it. There's a surprising amount of noise and misinformation within it. So it is useful, but you need to have some of those intelligence systems around it before it can be consumed and used to make a decision with.
Does it mean that if the building is damaged and you have 5 reports on the damaged building, and you basically 4 guys are telling one thing and 1 guy is lying, and you can tell?
Yeah, so for example, we got sent pictures of destroyed roads. They were actually pictures from the Manawatu, and when we ran them through things like Google image search, they came up, and so they'd obviously been nicked from another disaster. So people do these kinds of things. It doesn't mean don't trust anybody, but it does mean exercise a degree of certainty when you act.
To Sean's point, we're looking, as you say, crowdsourcing safety information, accessibility information. But previously we've had cyclists with a little Bluetooth device tell us when they feel safe and unsafe in real time. And I found that as a really good way to map out where people were having issues and then, act upon that. But also cyclists help other cyclists by saying, hey, go this way if you want to have a good experience. But what you said about the home technology, one of the pieces of feedback we had through the strategy consultation was somebody saying they wanted to get an API of all the potholes being fixed and other kind of, the amount of graffiti jobs coming through so they could pipe it into the screen of their smart fridge, which is, on the edge, but it got us thinking. And with the weather stations, I use an app that uses people's personal weather stations, and it's really cool having a weather station right around the corner instead of the official weather station, 3 k's down the road. So it's something that it has us thinking, and would like to think we can get more citizen data down the track for sure.
Cool. Any more questions there? Oh, in the middle.
Hey, you were talking about the barriers before, but none of you touched on something that I was thinking about, which is how far, is there any pushback from citizens in terms of some of the data that's being collected? Because you're talking about monitoring dogs barking, about graffitis, about other things. And the direction that it's heading, maybe at this point there is, people are okay with it, but surely they have concerns of how far you're gonna push it.
Kick this off. It's a good subject you've raised. We talked about those 14,000 cameras in Seoul and the issues that raises. When we were looking at pedestrian counting, for example, in our central city, we had the ability to get technology that could work out basically who you were, what age you were, what demographic, and then work out what shops you went to, how long you spent in the central business district. But we chose not to use that for obvious reasons, because we understand through our privacy review that we did and community feedback that that was unacceptable. So we chose a technology that does the analysis on camera, dumps the footage, and then gives us anonymous data just on numbers. So we couldn't tell that data even if we wanted to. But the capability is there. I suppose council's got to decide what they turn off or what they don't purchase, and then make it really clear to the community what data they're capturing and why they're doing it, and keep on having the conversation, because what's acceptable one day won't be the next, and what's acceptable through a terrorist event isn't acceptable on a normal Saturday afternoon. So there's all those considerations to have, but it's very much a part of every project we look at.
Sean, do you want to comment on that as well? Perhaps we've spoken about this before.
Yes, so one of the secrets of how we've managed to sustain these programs over so long was we were very proactive with designing those privacy impact assessments. So one of the early projects we did was to monitor breaking glass in a children's playground using sound. The reason we chose to use sound and put it into a children's playground was we thought of what is the most sinister thing we can think of in the most sensitive environment. And so that's what we used to develop the privacy governance. And if you're interested in what those frameworks look like, the G20 Smart Cities, they have a series of practice notes. The privacy one's based on what we do in Wellington. The other piece we found really interesting is which bits of privacy become lodged in the public imagination. So early on, we tried to do a project where we could smell vomit. So we created little sensors that smelled formic acid, which is in ants and vomit. It wasn't a particularly successful trial. In fact, it was one of the biggest failures, largely because it would go off every Tuesday. And the reason for that was because more Wilsons would cut their Parmesan cheese that day, and Parmesan cheese has that on it. And also, we live in the windiest city in the entire world. The smells don't hang around long enough to sense, so abject failure. But people became obsessed with the idea that I was trying to smell them. And I still get letters about it now. So with privacy, it's as important to tell people what you're not doing as what you are doing.
Thanks, Sean.
One other thing that is quite important, I think, is all of us using social media, and especially in events of emergency, the terrorist attack or earthquake or other emergency events. There are cases where you have to use open source intelligence and look for Twitter hashtags related to that location, or geolocated photos or similar, which helps to make a decision, help someone, save someone's life. So citizens subsequently become sources of that intelligence as well through social media, because they choose to post this photo or put that hashtag on.
Thank you. Any more questions there?
So
Any more
going
answers?
back to, you said you surveyed the public perception around what was applicable and what they accepted. With younger generations coming through that just are happy to share their whole lives, do you have a plan for how often you would retest what's acceptable?
That's a good point, and again, through the strategy consultation, a key point was having that real-time active communication. To your point, attitudes change, different generations, different things are acceptable, and when you've got a cross-section of, I suppose, an older part of your community right through to the TikTok crowd, you've got to balance needs and expectations. But yeah, you're right, things are changing pretty quickly, and what was acceptable today won't be tomorrow, and vice versa.
Yeah, it's always interesting to me what's the differences in acceptability as well. You know, we don't fly drones over private property, yet we get 15 times a day from Maxar.
That's a good point.
I'll just leave that there.
Right. Any more questions on that topic? Or answers?
There is one aspect of privacy that is particular to spatial data, and that's to do with resolution. And so what we're finding is we're having to be much more active with, particularly with using census systems and mapping them, because with some of the sensors, you can follow somebody home if you really, really wanted to. And so what that means is moving to cartographic methods to make sure that the interfaces don't allow that to happen, because ultimately, yes, we might have anonymised the dot, but if the dot goes to the same address each day, it's not hard to work out who it is.
Thanks, Sean. Any more questions there? I've got one more I wanted to ask. I'm not going to compete with you. No? Going. Okay, my question then. You mentioned there about resolution, Sean, and I was thinking earlier on about scale, that, you know, we're hearing that if you hear that Shanghai's got a smart city and you're in a town with a population of 100,000, you go, well, yeah, sure, they've got all the resources, it doesn't really apply to us. Is that scale, if you're looking at a smart city, is scale, maybe a small scale, is that an opportunity or is it a barrier?
It depends.
Okay.
So we did some interesting work in Wellington with companies that were exporting into Tokyo. And the reason they were doing work in Wellington was because we're a small city, but we're very, very complicated. So it's a good environment to do things that in Tokyo would have been completely overwhelming. And so often you see cities working together to scale things. The other point around scale is it really depends on your purpose. So I've always been of the view you don't have to do everything, you just have to do something and you have to do it well. And so if you look at what we've been looking at, it's climate change, earthquake resilience, and lately housing and urban planning. And those are the three things we focus on. We do the occasional odd thing on the side, but we realise that if we get those things right, then they will drag other innovations and other changes and investments through. And for any city, that's pretty much the key to doing it, is to find those 2 or 3 things that make your place special, that problem that you have that is what drives your community. And often other places will have that problem too. It just won't be their number one, and that's when you can start to trade. So for example, some of the stuff we do in the eastern suburbs of Wellington, where it's flat and sandy, are very similar to what's being done in Lower Hutt. It makes more sense for Lower Hutt to develop it and for us to import it than it does for us to try and do it on the side.
Thanks, Sean.
There have been a lot of good people in the smaller centres around New Zealand currently and in the past. Thinking of Far North District Council at the moment, down in Timaru, there's a couple of really good people. Queenstown's got a lot of good stuff happening too. What I find it's a little bit more trepidatious in terms of it being based on 1 or 2 key individuals. So it can be a little bit fragile in terms of, I suppose, continuity if people leave or if there's a change of mayor. But on the flip side, they can really try and experiment things quickly that maybe bigger centres couldn't. So to Sean's point, the real value would be, as you say, joining forces, learning from each other, swapping IP and supporting each other through that journey. And that's always good, getting you through the tough times as well. You've got mates to lean on.
Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, just to add to that, on digital awareness, I guess it's everyone's job who are technical to bring that up. In my organisation, you know, things just get done by hand. We think we can automise a lot of it. But there are parts of the community that, you know, don't have access or have never had that growing up. So yeah, how do we bring them up to the same digital maturity, I guess?
Understood. Cool. I think we'll call the panel discussion to a close just now. I want to just ask you to join me in thanking our panel for the awesome conversation. Thanks very much, guys. We're now going to just switch gears, as they say in Esri presentations, and we're going to move across to some technical stuff. Back here, from Omi and Zorko. Why don't you both come up? Come on, there's room. There's 12 chairs up here, so there's room for all of you. It's like a sky couch. Cool. So, as I said, change tack a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about some of the technology aspects. And we heard planning came up. Planning was one of the initial phases in terms of having a smart city. A tool, an Esri tool that you've seen a few places over the last few days, designed to help with the visualization, understanding of planning, is ArcGIS Urban. And to give us a little bit of an update on ArcGIS Urban, where it fits into this crazy world of planning, I'm going to ask Omid, who's a specialist in this area, to give us some slides and a bit of a demonstration. Is that right?
Yeah.
Nice.
Cool. Hello, everyone. And
whoa!
Is it what happened? Sorry. Okay. Yeah, sorry for that. Yeah, just don't know what's happened. But anyway, thanks everyone for listening to the presentation. So today I would like to talk about a recent Esri Smart City Planning tool and how we can use it within New Zealand context to help city councils to achieve the new planning policies and objectives announced by the central government on their National Policy Statement on Urban Development. So a bit about myself. I'm a GIS consultant at Eagle Technology, and I'm mostly working with smart city planning using Esri tools. So I will start with a bit of an overview of New Zealand urban planning context and the challenges that we have in the country in terms of urban planning. And then I will just dive into ArcGIS Urban and explain about the key features of this web app, which is then followed by applicability of ArcGIS Urban in achieving and in incorporating NPSUD into district plans. Then I will showcase some of our experiences using ArcGIS Urban across New Zealand, specifically Palmerston North and Christchurch City. I guess, as Andreas mentioned, we actually design and make digital twin to solve a problem. And here, as you may know, we do have a really a planning challenge in New Zealand to make a digital twin for. So housing shortage is a planning challenge in New Zealand indeed, and this is partly due to the current district plan rules that restrict multi-unit and multi-story housing. So a new planning approach also, as you're aware of, is introduced in 2020 following the announcement of National Planning Statement on Urban Development, which now we call it in short form NPSUD, and later the amendments in the RMA to strengthen NPSUD and require city councils to incorporate medium density residential housing into their district plans. City councils are required to make changes in district plans to reflect the new objectives and policies. And as of one of the most important policies is intensification and then a medium density residential standards. So here I would like to introduce an awesome 3D interactive web app that could be really helpful for city councils across New Zealand to incorporate these changes into their district plan. And this is ArcGIS Urban. So ArcGIS Urban is a web-based 3D scenario planning system built as an extension to ArcGIS Online, focused on transforming the planning and design practice. Urban enables data-driven urban design by linking regulatory changes with the ability to both parametrically and interactively model and test alternative scenarios. So let's explain about how is urban planning process using ArcGIS Urban. So urban planning with ArcGIS Urban starts with importing spatial and non-spatial data such as 3D base map, zoning layers, parcels, and district plan rules into urban database. Then a plan could be created for a specific area, and various development approaches could be modeled and evaluated as scenarios. Then the plan could be shared internally with other teams, such as infrastructure planners and transport engineers, or later for public engagement. So let's dive a bit deeper into ArcGIS Urban and explain its key features. So Urban merges a digital copy of the built environment, which is connected to existing GIS data layers, with web-based interactive zoning analysis and planning tools. So here in this video, you see a digital representation of Christchurch CBD along with zones. So here, instead of browsing through all the several PDF documents of district plan, we can easily just find out key zoning rules just by a click on a zone. Also, at the parcel scale, you can see all the zoning rules for that parcel. So building envelope here shows the extension to which the district plan rules allow to build. This is a useful feature for development capacity assessment, which then could be used by city councils. So this is the environment of Urban. We have plans for long-term planning activities. Just want to replay that. Oh. Just a second, just the video is. Sorry for that. So we have plans for long-term planning activities, projects for short-term activities, and then we have indicators, which are plan context. And also within a plan, we can model and test different development approaches as different scenarios. And at the same time, other than the landscape, we can see the development capacity and impacts for each scenario. So it's really easy to compare. Also, we can quickly create new zoning types, and then we can enter all the values for different zoning from maximum height, coverage, setbacks, recession planes. We can even upload zoning boundaries as in like feature layer from ArcGIS Online. We can define space use types, which are micro scale land uses, which basically shows the usage of each floor, and then we can configure the metrics for each space use type. We can configure building types in here. So we have control over the type of the building, the density and number of floors, for instance. And also we can configure all the capacity metrics within the dashboard, so we can also formulate them. Also, other than 3D visualization of the proposed developments, ArcGIS Urban calculates development capacity and impacts for each scenario, either as cumulative impacts or as per space use type. As you can see, like we have just browsed through different space use type and see like how many dwellings are under that space use type. Even at parcel scale, you can see like we can just have capacity metrics on the, in parcel scale as well. And this is the just here we can just define and formulate capacity metrics, depends on the project targets and plans. Also ArcGIS Urban is a foundation building block for creating content for collaboration. So with Urban, planners can generate 2D and 3D scenarios and share these scenes with the public as part of a larger planning initiative. So these scenes can be used in conjunction with ArcGIS Hub and ArcGIS Story Map to create a richer engagement with your community. So now let's see how ArcGIS Urban could be used in New Zealand context to help councils to incorporate NPSUD policies and objectives into their district plan. So ArcGIS Urban is a useful geospatial tool for local governments to test and incorporate NPSUD requirements. For instance, for intensification, a current low-density residential zone for an urban block could easily be changed to a medium residential density in another scenario, and then planners can quickly change the regulation and see the new landscape and development capacity for each scenario, even in the urban block and also at parcel scale as well. As you can see, we can visualize building envelope and see like how much like the buildable extent given the new zoning rules. Also, housing supply is a big concern that NPSUD targets. So scenario modeling in ArcGIS Urban allows planners to see housing and population capacity enabled in each scenario and for each property lot or subdivision. And also they can see how closely it fulfills the predictions in the HBA or housing and business capacity assessment. So also medium density residential requirements could be modeled as well. So for that, just this happens. So we can, in urban, we can quickly create a new zoning type. And then for medium density residential developments, you can just like choose the color and other details. And then we can just go through the zoning regulation. You can easily enter all the values that the MDRS suggests from the tire setbacks and recession planes, which is 60 degrees starting at 4 meters. And then once it's created, we can just assign this new zone to an urban block just easily, just by just modifying the zone, and we can just quickly see the changes in the zoning parameters. And yeah, just all the changed, as you can see, and also at parcel scale as well. So you can see that how much more development capacity is enabled at parcel scale by visualizing building envelopes. Also, housing and business need assessment requires councils to estimate future business growth along with new housing supply. So ArcGIS Urban offers a 3D interactive solution to visualize business areas and store business details and growth predictions individually for each business. So as you can see, like we can just see all the, I guess, a number of business, number of workers in each business, and what is expected in the future. So this scene could easily be shared within the council and also like with the public for their feedback as well. So here I would like to showcase some of our experiences in New Zealand. So we have been working in partnership with Palmerston North City Council, leveraging ArcGIS Urban for NPSUD plan changes. So mass models are created in ArcGIS Urban, reflecting the missing middle housing type, which is suggested in the NPSUD. Then we fine-tune the models through integration of ArcGIS Urban and City Engine and applying in Palmi specific CGA rules to building layouts. Then housing, as you can see, housing density reduces as we get farther from the neighborhood center, starting from apartments and then down to triplex and duplex houses. And then the final detail scene could be shared within the council and with public for public engagement. Yeah, and also another thing that we did for Palmi is latent capacity assessment. Which the main purpose of latent capacity assessment is that to estimate how much housing and population capacity is currently available within maximum height limits, which is 9 meters in case of Palmerston North. And in another scenario, which is then orange floors, is that we estimate the capacity in case of increasing maximum height limit to 11 meters. This is really helpful because given the new amendments in the RMA, which builders do not need to require and I guess go through the council for building up to 3 story on each parcel. So you can quickly just check it. And then this is a 3D data model for Palmerston North CBD, which is mostly used for, I guess, business side of urban planning, and you can just store the details of each businesses on each floor, which then could be shared. Also for Christchurch City, we created a digital representation of Christchurch City. We codified current district plan rules of Christchurch into an ArcGIS Urban for CBD. So you can see, you can easily click on each zone and see all the zoning regulations. And then we also did an latent capacity assessment for a sample of Christchurch as well. So ArcGIS Urban is continuing developing. So then the latest release is June 2022. And then many functionalities added to ArcGIS Urban. For example, the ability to undo and redo things, as Scott mentioned yesterday. A new set of zoning and overlay symbologies added into an ArcGIS Urban can now export your, I guess, different viewpoints of ArcGIS Urban as different slides into a web scene. And also a new Urban API, like a first version of Urban API is introduced, which significantly adds to functionality of ArcGIS Urban. For example, we can automate tasks now, and we can use we can export data from ArcGIS Urban and do further analysis outside it, and then feed it back into ArcGIS Urban, which is really cool. And here's just a road ahead for ArcGIS Urban, which assumes Scott mentioned yesterday. So yeah, local coordinate system is indeed in their roadmap for ArcGIS Urban, because currently our Urban works in WGS, but I guess in the near future we'll see Urban will support NZTM as well.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Omid.
You're welcome.
Okay. You can press quickly number 2.
Oh, sorry.
This is Zorko, then press your number. So Zorko Zosterich is also part of the Eagle team based in Auckland. And the question about gamers before, who asked about gamers? I'm pretty sure his hand would have been up. Yep, a couple in there. So Zorko has been immersed in 3D his whole life, unlike the rest of us who live 2D existences. And he's going to tell us a little bit about procedural generation and gaming engines that we've heard a bit about before, perhaps a bit more information.
Yeah. Thank you, Scott. So I'll try to make it simple and maybe not as fancy as we've seen from Oricon before, but I want to show you some of the tools that we have right now and how you can use them. For ArcGIS, it all starts with City Engine. So here I have a project using all the buildings or all the data that you have, doing all the usual methodology that we have, file, export models, and from all these models, you would use Unreal Engine and DataSmith format. Once you do the export, again, I don't want to do the export, we can start putting into game engine. One of the game engines that we are supporting is Unreal Game Engine. And this is something that was available from 2018 for free. So this is City Engine VR experience, and that allows you to start exploring your models from City Engine in VR environment. And this is how that application looks like. You have office environment, and you have this little odd blue thing in the middle, which is your virtual table. Now, what you would have to do, use your DataSmith plugin, which is free, and you pick your DataSmith file. So if I would go to this folder, City Engine, and if I look Smart Cities, Models, DataSmith, pick a file and click Open. I'm not going to do that because, as you see, I talk about VR, but I don't have a headset, because that's really good way to induce motion sickness in pretty much all of you, especially after dinner. So it's really that simple. Once you get that, you will be pushed out a little bit out of this area. It would look something like in here, but you would see your data, and you are ready to start viewing it. You press play, and you see that in the table, and you can manipulate. To show how it looks without jerky movement or anything like that, here is the video. So it's a multiplayer experience, so you will see 2 people or more can work together, waving each other. And we have all the functionality that you expect. Movement of panning through the model, rotating, zooming in, all of that is available through this virtual environment. So you have a head-mount display and you just explore this environment. We can also not only manipulate the environment, but also look into scenarios, which we heard about from City Engine and Urban, looking at these different scenarios and examining them in this virtual environment that we see. We can also look at the shadows, which was being mentioned several times, how that impacts your urban design, so you can simply explore that in that virtual environment, how it looks like. Using game engine technology, you can teleport yourself into the model and see it in a real scale, and you actually see how big your proposal actually is. So is it big enough or it's too big? But this is something that you have to decide on. So that is how we can work with existing tools that we have. Now, what I'd like to show you is something that Esri is doing internally. This is internal research project that Esri is currently doing or using. So this is what is looking quite familiar to the video you just saw. We have a virtual environment, obviously without VR headset. So we have a little environment, and I'm hoping I'm not going too quickly. I come closer to a table, left mouse button, I can pan, I can look around, I can use middle mouse button to zoom in, and basic manipulation. Now, if I would like to reset my view, easy enough, and I see some bookmarks. Clicking on a bookmark tells me what it is and gives me a little bit more detail, so I can view this with more closer look or use these teleport points. I can see that from predefined location, switch to a couple of other locations, like a view from the terrace. And if I actually look to this side, you can even have moving vegetation to bring that realism. Now, I'd like to go back and exit in here, and I'd like to look at this particular plan. You may have seen it from before, from various ArcGIS urban demos. So that is Boston Dot area project that's been featured in too many videos, but now we can see it in VR. What we can see is how it looks in terms of existing plan. So there is a bit of lack of features in here. I can look at initial plan, I can look at refined plan or suitability. But what is making it a little bit more interesting is I can do some cosmetic things. I think the weather effects were quite hit in previous presentations, I would assume. So if I bring my environment, I can change time of the day, bring the shadows. I can make it cloudy, and I can actually say, oh, let's make it like stormy. So I have a lot of cloud, or just a very little bit of cloud. Rain, of course. Doing any of that. If I turn on the rain, it starts raining and doing all of that. This is cosmetics, but what I would like to also point out that we actually have, a dashboard. So that's a simple dashboard that's being pushed in a virtual environment. This is also multi-user environment, and I can look at, this is example of suitability scenario, initial scenario, and sorry, let me just make it sure you see it, and refined. You see it changes in real time as you pick different scenario. There's a bit of a help how you can navigate in this virtual environment, and there's also option when you start this to have this as host, so you can be a host and other people can join. So this is just an example what might be coming your way, but there are things that were there already for some time. That first example has been there since 2018, free to use from Unreal Engine Marketplace. And then we can start getting our data and seeing what are other possibilities. So these are some of the examples how we can use ArcGIS procedural modeling, which we have in City Engine, and push it into immersive environments like either on-screen or virtual reality or augmented reality using the game engine as vehicles. So that's what I have.
Thank you,
Back to Scott.
Thanks very much. Okay, so we're now going to come to our last presentation, and we're going to invite possibly Bevan and Max together. Double X? Okay. You've only got one microphone. You might have to get really close around the microphone here. So Bevan and Max are from Unmanned Aerial Solutions, Aircraft Solutions, sorry. And while I just do the slides here. And you should be good to go.
Great.
All yours. Take it away.
Lucky last, eh? The end of a big 3 days for you guys, so we'll keep it brief and lots of pictures. But yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for having us. So as mentioned, my name's Bevan. I am half of this team. So I'm not a geospatial specialist at all. I spend all my day looking at the world from the top down, but that's from an aeroplane. So I'm an ex-avionics engineer and a pilot at the moment, but Maxim and I met up over drones. I do drone consulting, and I help companies get their drone certification underway, and that's how I met Maxim at Woods. And we've spent the last few years catching up regularly, talking about the technology, and that's where the Christchurch Aerospace Challenge came in. So we saw this thing pop up from Smart Christchurch, and we thought that's exactly what we've been thinking about trying to do. So we put our heads together and we came up with a plan. We started off with the challenge. So they gave us quite a specific brief for the Christchurch Aerospace Challenge. So they wanted to innovate in that aerial mapping space. So as you guys, I'm sure, are well aware, there's three platforms you can get aerial imagery from at the moment. You can go down to Harvey Norman, you can buy a DJI Phantom, and you can go and fly it where you're allowed to. Or you can buy some satellite imagery if the sky's clear enough. Or you can hire a large format manned aircraft to capture it for you as well. And those things take time, and we know they're very subject to weather. So the Aerospace Challenge was really about trying to cut down that time. How quickly can we get that data turned around? How can we innovate? Drones is obviously, I imagine there's been quite a bit of discussion about drones over the last 2 years and last 2 days, and Maxim and I have spent years flying them and trying to make them work. And as you know, there's challenges. We've talked about privacy briefly. Operating beyond line of sight is that holy grail that would unlock a lot of capability, but it comes with a lot of challenges: technology, sense and avoid, and then regulatory privacy. So we want to find that spot in the middle where we can use that technology, that advancement, the automation, the sensors, but we can get them flying without some of those other hassles of privacy beyond line of sight. And so we came up with our concept. Yep. Let's try that. And we started with our perfect solution. So those things we were looking for: fast, ideally it's processed in real time or close to. It's in the format we want, it's high resolution. We can capture different types of data at the same time. And that's one of the benefits of a manned aircraft system, is you're not so limited by payload. Ideally it would be classified, low cost, and increasingly now low carbon. And so we came up with the Rapid Mapper, and this is the prototype that we developed and have been flying. So the challenge of sticking something on a manned aircraft, right, is that it comes with certification hassles. And so we had to be really smart about how we could get it on an aircraft easily. And so that's about small form factor, low effect on drag, and self-contained, so we don't have to tap into the aircraft's power system. Fully self-contained, put it on, and then get it flying, take it off again, so you don't, so it's not on the aircraft all the time. And then you can choose the platform. You can customize the platform. So if you've got a large area and you want to fly fast, you can stick it on a fixed wing. If you've got a small area or you want to fly slower or lower, you can put it on a helicopter. Or you can take the sensors out and put them on a drone. So you've got that interoperability. We wanted to cut down on processing time, so we don't want to have to walk up to it, pull an SD card out, carry it over to the laptop. stick the laptop on the corner and watch it crunch the numbers. So we wanted to get connectivity on there. So 4G connectivity, get the data off to the cloud where it can be processed on the cloud, and then we just get told when it's ready. This system here, we've got obviously RGB imagery, and we've been able to capture multispectral as well. Some of the other things, yeah, so we're working on that custom data processing pipeline. And again, so that's giving the client visibility so they know where their product is in the pipeline, rather than just ordering the data and then having to wait 4, 5, 6 months and then it shows up. They can see how it's progressing. So we're building that into the web interface. So that was the hardware side of things. Max, do you want to talk about the software? And then they don't have to listen to me anymore. Yeah. So basically, software has a few components. So we have a front end, which basically is designed to help the client task the job, prepare the job, and basically your area of interest, and it sort of all integrates together with the flight management system for the pilot when the system goes out and starts mapping. So we currently designed 2 modes. So one is called set and forget. It's the idea for piggybacking on the existing flights. For example, it's an emergency type scenario where the firefighting going or some sort of emergency sort of flies through for river engineer to assess the sort of scale of the floods. The system will start mapping automatically if it enters the area of interest, as you can see on the screenshot. And we're also sort of working on the sort of classic approach for traditional mapping with your flight lines. That's the sort of front end, but on what's happening on the back end is all the smarts. That's sort of the data processing, where we want to get imagery as fast as we can. Or obviously, there is a sort of pros and cons with it. Comes to resolution, accuracy, and time frame. If it's an emergency type scenario, the data has to be delivered tomorrow or yesterday. Then that's when you have to sort of make a decision. Also, we're sort of working with a few AI detection tools to be able to identify or classify features. Also, classify different sort of land types and turn it into some sort of metric reporting. In terms of delivering the data, again, we're sort of trying to eliminate this sort of sharing hard drive, sharing USB sticks, move everything onto the cloud. Also integrations through APIs with different GIS software packages as well. So basically what you see on data links with your WMS, WMTS, or XYZ tiles, sort of working on that delivery type as well. And what's happening for the back end is the web viewer for the customer to sort of visualize the data, basically. So that's the sort of comes into one umbrella. So currently we're working as a data as a service type scenario, but we sort of looking in the future where we would like to commercialize the product and turn it into one bundle, which basically hardware is just your enabler, but the whole environment consists of the actual hardware and all the software package that comes with it. So we currently passed that sort of initial stage, currently working together with Christchurch City Council to start moving on to the next stage, improving sensors, improving interoperability between different platforms, aircraft, helicopters, drones, trialing different sensors to see which sensor suits better task. Yeah, and we sort of, it's quite good to be in Christchurch doing this stuff because aerospace is booming, and we get a lot of support from local community, and we get a lot of comms going on with local tech companies who would like to have similar system on their platforms, or who currently developing something software-wise. So that's us.
Thanks, guys. Thanks very much.
That's all right. Thank you.
Cool. Okay, I'm conscious of time, and we are now 2 minutes past 4, which by my standards is pretty early normally. My timekeeping's not the best. I did want to open us up for maybe some very quick questions for any of the last presenters. I'm conscious people might have to leave and catch flights, but let's do a few quick questions. My runner's still there. Who's my runner? Just for the benefit, wait for the mic just for the benefit of people who are still online there. Yep, just at the front here. Oh, Zorko's beating you to it.
Can you hear me? Yeah, that's better. Thank you very much for sharing the last part. Exciting. What's the flight time from battery perspective and data storage perspective?
So at the moment, our current system that you see in there can fly for about 5 hours on the battery. And then your data is limited to how big so there is onboard storage as well. So we've designed the system so that if you're not within wireless coverage, then it stores on the device. And then we're just limited by the size of the hard drive, effectively. Yeah.
Maybe one more question, perhaps, just in time out the corner.
Can you just pull LAS files straight out of there, or is that kind of not really? Can you actually get the point cloud data out as LAS files, or?
So at the moment, Max, you want to talk about the process?
Sorry, so you're asking if we can pull out?
LAS files, point cloud, or just point cloud?
So at this stage, we're looking at aerial imagery only. So we can generate photogrammetry type, but that's just a byproduct.
Yeah, have you seen anything in the market that can actually do a similar thing for LiDAR as well, where you could kind of mount it to a fixed wing aircraft in the same way?
Yeah, there are quite a lot of different systems, mostly driven by a few number of suppliers, Regal, Leica.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this is a bit different. Yeah, that's one.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to suggest that we've had our fill of geospatial for the last 3 days. People need to make a move and go back to the real world. I want to finish by thanking all of our presenters again for their awesome contributions this afternoon in the 2 sessions. Please join me in thanking them for that. Please come up and join me afterwards. I've got a little small gift for all the presenters. I want to thank all of you for taking the time to come and join us, not just for these sessions, but for the last 3 days. It's been an awesome 3 days. We've loved having you back in the community face-to-face. We look forward to seeing you at various points over the next year, and then face-to-face again, all of you in Auckland in September next year. Thank you very much.